Good morning, everyone. We might get everyone to start taking their seats if they could. Just before we begin, if anyone needs live captions, they will be on the screen, but there's also a little TV down here if people wanted to move a little bit closer to the captions. Okay, well, welcome everyone and good morning. My name is Mary Sayers and I'm the CEO of the National Disability Research Partnership. It's my profound honour today to begin by welcoming Auntie Glendra. Auntie Glendra Stubbs, OAM, is a Wiradjuri elder from Mudgee, Dubbo and the Narrandera area. She's been an elder in residence at the University of Technology, Sydney since 2020. For more than 40 years, Auntie Glendra has walked alongside survivors of trauma, offering cultural wisdom, practical guidance and unwavering advocacy. Auntie Glendra's leadership is grounded in culture, community and justice. We are deeply honoured you're here today and thank you. And please join me in warmly welcoming Auntie Glendra.
Thank you, lovely. Thank you. I think I've got my fan club here. Well, where do you start? I need to do a disclaimer. I'm really damaged at the moment, so I'm just putting it out there. Thank you, Sissy. Anyway, I better get on to what I'm supposed to be doing. So, Yalamandu Marang, Galindera. I'd like to welcome everyone here. This is profoundly important. Personally for me, important, but profoundly important for this country and for any other country that your research is going to take you to. So, as you see, I have the walker, which, shouldn't be a problem these days. I work for the Royal Commission into Child Sexual Abuse, funded by the Attorney General's. I think there was $100 million of funding, and I used to have to walk through the tip to get to my office. Or either that or walk up 18 stairs. So, people say stuff, but it's bullshit. We're disabled friendly? No, bullshit. So I sometimes I just used to sit outside at the coffee shop next door and people could come and meet me there, better than going through the tip. Because you can imagine a 30-floor building, the amount of crap that you got to walk through. So, I bet some other people have had to do that too here. So, and then the other thing is that you don't want to have a disability in this country if you're trying to keep your children with you. It is not a possibility. You are up against the powers of big agencies that get a lot of money to have our kids in care. Also a personal story, and very raw because that happened to my granny yesterday. And I'm barred from seeing her. So, OAM doesn't mean anything when you're up against people who have got ideas of what family is that are different to the real families. So, I hope I haven't traumatised anyone too much, but it's I haven't had therapy for this and I needed to get this out here. So just send the bill to Scotty for my therapy session. And if you want a good hug, where's that girl that woke me up? Oh my God, Jasmine does good hugs, wherever she is. Oh, God, how'd you get over there? Oh, she is magic. Okay, and so proud of everyone coming. There's hardly a seat in the room, which just shows how people with disability are being looked after. Research is what you need. Because if you don't have that, you don't have... It's like having stats, eh? Eh? If you haven't got it, you haven't got the research and you haven't got the stats, you don't get the funding, and then nothing changes. So, I haven't done the acknowledgement, have I? Oh, sorry about that. But as everyone knows, I run my own race. When you're 70-something years of age and you've been around and done as much as I have, you don't really have to ask permission. You just ask for forgiveness afterwards, eh? So if I've, gone off track, it's all Scotty's fault. What a deadly man, eh? We tracked each other down many years ago, didn't we, darling? Yeah, and when you find good people, you don't let them go, you keep them in your life. So we'll be watching you, Minister, making sure you're doing a good job. No pressure. Hey? Good. So I'd like to acknowledge we're on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. I also want to say to all people who've come from other countries and from other places, you are welcome. We are a big country. We have a lot of room here. We've seen some crappy shit, eh? Ooh. I can't think of another word for it. And it is true, eh? We've seen some stuff that doesn't sit well. And you feel powerless because how do you change these people's minds without being whacking them? That's apparently illegal. Yeah, so I just think, grab the good stuff. Everybody in this room is here because they want to make a difference, and they want to make a difference to our most vulnerable people in this country. And if we can do that, it will flow on to everyone. So proud to be here. Welcome our brothers and sisters that are from other countries and from across the ditch. We need to look across the ditch on how we treat our Indigenous people. When I go to New Zealand, I'm treated like Goddess Glendra. You get sat out the front, you get fed first, everyone else is starving and you got the plate of food on your lap. So, that's how everyone should be treated in this country. So thank you, and sorry I rave on a bit, but everybody knows that's how I am, because there's always a narrative to tell. And I'm just so proud that yous have all made it here, that, I got up at 4 o'clock to get here, and if I fall asleep at the table, it's all Scotty's fault. So big hugs to you. Thank you, Minister, for putting time out of your busy day. And let's make sure everybody in this country is treated properly and respectfully and the best that we can do. Big hugs. And I think I've pinched the pen. I've pinched a pen.
Thank you so much, Auntie Glendra. Thank you for grounding us in culture today, in community, and responsibility. We're deeply grateful for your leadership and for the generosity you've shown in opening our event. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands we're meeting on today, and acknowledge all our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are in the room today, and also online. I acknowledge you, I acknowledge your elders, and I acknowledge your ancestors. While today is a hugely positive milestone, our discussions are on the safety of people with disability, and we may include reference to experiences of harm, neglect and trauma. We provide this content warning to invite everyone to prioritise their wellbeing throughout this session. And before we move to the Minister's address, I wanted to briefly talk about some of the access. We have people here who are joining us online and in the room here today. And you'll see we will have Auslan interpreters and captions available online. And I want to let you know that that's delivered via the screen and the Zoom channel rather than in person. And this moment actually brings in sharp focus one of the themes that you touched on, Auntie Glendra, around our funding topic of accessible and inclusive community. Unfortunately, despite booking well in advance, many months, and lots of follow-up from the team, we were unable to have Auslan interpreters in the room today, and for that I'm humbly sorry. Accessibility is not abstract, it's practical, it's real time, and it requires design and investment and responsiveness. Thank you for your partnership today, and let's hope we can ensure everyone participates meaningfully. So we've got a number of significant announcements today. Today's session is being recorded and people across the country will be able to access it afterwards. And we do note that it is quite early in WA. And for our WA colleagues, thank you for joining us so early. For those joining online, you're being hosted by our wonderful Deputy CEO, Sue Tape, with the support of Kira. And they'll guide the online experience, monitor questions, and ensure smooth participation throughout the morning. After the Minister speaks, I'll provide a short briefing for everyone to walk through what the session will cover and how the morning will unfold. This is the exciting bit. We're here today to launch a new $5 million disability research funding round supported by the Australian Government. And this is to expand research led by and with people with disability. And you'll hear that over and over again today. This builds on the success of our inaugural 2025 round, and I'm very happy that we've got a number of our research teams that are here today who were funded last year and still doing their beautiful co-design work, and you'll hear about that as well. But we'll also introduce the first cohort of our Disability Research Leadership Program and the launch of Citizen Research Essentials, Australia's first co-designed disability research micro-credential. But I'll stop talking. It's my great pleasure to invite the Minister for the NDIS, Senator the Honourable Jenny McAllister, to formally launch this round of funding and to address us today. Minister McAllister has been a champion for inclusion, equity and human rights, and her role is critical in shaping policies that advance dignity and wellbeing of people with disability. We know that in order to mobilise disability research into policy and practice, that close relationships with government are needed and end users of research. The Minister has a tightly scheduled morning and will need to depart shortly after her address, so I will not be able to take any questions this morning. And on behalf of the NDRP board and all our team, I'd like to thank the Minister for being here today and welcome you to give us an address.
Oh, good morning, everybody. What a fantastic opportunity for me to be here with you, Mary. Thank you for such a generous and warm welcome. Mary was amongst the first of the people that I met with when I was appointed into this role, and we formed a very immediate and easy connection around some of the work that she and the team are leading. There is so much to do and say about the challenges and opportunities of working collaboratively with community to generate research. And I'm just so excited by today's event, by the people that I've met this morning, and by the work that I know is underway in so many of your institutions and your organisations to build some really terrific insight that we can practically use in community. Auntie Glendra, thank you so much for your remarks, your acknowledgement, and your openness about your own experience. You spoke about what it means to be here, not just today, but every day, to turn up and make a difference. And that, of course, requires great strength, but it also occasions vulnerability. And those two things so often go together and require a measure of courage and solidarity to address them and respond to them. And I thank you for all that you bring into every room. It's really lovely to see you here, and I thank you. I thank you for your acknowledgement of First Nations people, and I extend my respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, to their elders past and present, and all of those people who are joining us from country, online, as well as here in the room. It's basically nearly 30 years since here at UTS a researcher first coined the term neurodiversity. And Judy Singer took a really important step forward that was significant internationally in terms of research and understanding of disability. And her research was based on deeply personal observations of the women in her family and indeed herself. She reframed neurological difference not as a deficit, but part of the natural spectrum of human variation. And I tell that story because it reminds us of something quite fundamental. Transformative ideas in disability research so often begin with lived experience. And they begin with people who've navigated systems that weren't necessarily built for them, who were prompted by their experience to ask questions that others had overlooked. And in doing so, their work has reshaped our understanding of what diversity and inclusion means. And this is really at the essence of what I think we're all trying to do with disability research, to bring the community in as partners and as researchers, as experts, as a critical part of knowledge and solution making. This is the approach that is informing the work of Evidence to Action, which is the NDRP's critical project to connect people to understand the insights that are needed to drive collaboration. And it aligns with our shared responsibility to share research problems and capabilities, and indeed to translate them into policy and government decision making. But I've started this conversation even this morning with a number of people. That work is not straightforward. In fact, it takes incredible skill to bring community, people whose focus is not academic in nature, into conversation and partnership with academic research. And that's true for every community. It's not unique to the disability community. It is in itself a core skill. And it's one that I'm really interested in and think is critical to the processes for government and for research, in fact. I was really pleased to see Jill Duncan here this morning, and Jill, welcome. It's lovely. I'm really glad you're here. Of course, Jill is leading the Evidence Advisory Committee with a range of esteemed colleagues and working on a methodology that really centres engagement with the disability community in assessing some of the supports. And I'm really been so excited to see the very thoughtful way that they have developed in asking non-academics to assist them in defining the questions that they'll need to answer as part of their work. I should acknowledge that Mary is also very busy on that committee, and we thank you for your contribution, Mary. You know, I'm a feminist. I've been in politics for a long time advocating for the inclusion and role of women, and of course I'm not unique in observing that it makes a real difference to have women at the table, having a seat at the table. And one of the reasons that's true is it changes the questions that we're asking and the solutions that we're generating. Women bring new perspectives that would otherwise be overlooked and ignored. And so when, for example, our government designed fee-free TAFE, we made sure that it worked for women. We ensured that there were places available in female-dominated industries, and we opened new doors by supporting women to step into construction, clean energy and advanced manufacturing, areas where they're historically underrepresented. When we were making the PBS medicines cheaper, we wanted women to get full benefits with new contraceptions listed on the PBS for the first time in 30 years. And so this truism is actually very practically real. When women are at the table, we have more inclusive outcomes. In exactly the same way, people with disability need to be at the table, because without that lived experience shaping the work, we miss crucial insights about what actually works, what really matters, and honestly, what needs fixing. These are insights that are not possible if disabled people are not at the table. And it's why we value the National Disability Research Partnership as the vehicle to develop a coordinated approach to funding and undertaking disability research. And it's my hope that we can very carefully build something that is of real value that can lead not just in Australia but actually in the world. The Royal Commission asked us to deliver high quality research on the experiences of people with disability, particularly in the context of violence, abuse, neglect and exploitation. And they're in fact asking us to do things. And the first was to look at, to deliver research that looks at questions that are overlooked, but the second was to do it through centring disability knowledge and expertise and making sure it was at the heart of that effort. So I'm really delighted to be able to officially launch the NDRP's 2026 Disability Research Funding Round and to announce, as Mary has indicated, the government's investment of $5 million towards projects that will drive the research agenda. This funding continues on the foundation that was established by the NDRP's previous funding round, which funded 15 research projects. And one of those projects on reproductive justice and neurodivergence will be showcased later on today. The funding for this round will support research in two priority areas: safety for people with disability and accessible and inclusive communities. These areas are central to government's priorities, articulated in Australia's disability strategy and informed by the recommendations that were made by the Disability Royal Commission. We should understand that partnership with disability will only enhance the rigour and meaning of the research. It is in the interests of people with disability to get the best possible answers and gain the greatest insight into some of the complex policy problems that we're wrestling with and have been for quite some time. Now, lots of people in this room will know Mary O'Kane and the work that she led recently on higher education and university research across Australia, and her report stressed the need to ensure that educationally disadvantaged groups have equal access and opportunity to higher education. And it also notes that students with disability make up just 8.7% of total PhD enrolments. And it's why I'm delighted to launch the NDRP's Disability Research Leadership Program. We know that good research requires good research careers, and this program is more than a series of grants, but about creating a pathway that supports emerging researchers from postgraduate study into long-term careers. And it's a pathway that seeks to strengthen the research workforce to reflect the true diversity of our community. The program will provide successful higher degree researchers with up to $30,000 towards their research and their professional development. And I know the first intake for this program generated a very high level of interest and that Mary will announce the first recipients of the program shortly. So congratulations. It is a really significant achievement to have been successful in this very highly competitive endeavour. And look, finally, I am also delighted to launch the NDRP's partnership with Griffith University, and Mary has acknowledged this. I had a chance to speak with Kelsey earlier, and she talked to me about the work that has already been done to establish a methodology for training people with disability to engage effectively with research. This partnership will create a free, accessible pathway for people with disability to participate in, influence and lead research across Australia, and that is really building those practical skills of connection that are absolutely essential to allow community-centred research to flourish. So altogether, these initiatives, I think, really strengthen our disability research ecosystem. We are building capability, leadership and evidence that can support safer and more inclusive communities. And I really encourage researchers, advocates, policymakers and people with disability to engage with these opportunities and be part of shaping Australia's research future. So thank you all for the work that you do. Thank you for being here today. And I really look forward to seeing the impact of the research that grows from today.
I think that deserves another round of applause. Thank you, Minister. And thank you for your leadership as well. for your belief in disability-led research, and for your commitment to building an inclusive national research system. Big thanks to the Australian Government for investing in this rigorous lived experience research that delivers actionable evidence for policy and practice, but also importantly, as we've heard, supporting capacity strengthening that is needed to overcome some of the structural and systemic barriers for disability-led research. On behalf of the board, some of whom are online, and our chair, who's overseas at the moment and couldn't be in here, is up very late in Europe, welcome. Thank you to everyone here in the room and for joining us online. And thank you again, Minister. We know many of you have travelled, many of you are juggling competing priorities, and we know many of you bring deep lived experience and professional expertise to this work. And it matters because what we are launching today shows that this is a changing deliberately, structurally and nationally. The NDRP was established to do something different, to fund research buy-in with people with disability, to embed co-design, shared governance and power-aware practice as the norm, not the exception, and to ensure research evidence is actually used to make real-world change and to improve safety, inclusion and everyday outcomes. Since becoming an independent organisation, we've focused on building strong foundations, trusted partnerships, transparent processes and programs that grow leadership across the disability research ecosystem. Today, I'm hoping you'll see what that looks like in practice, and we've got a really exciting morning lined up for you. First off, our partnerships, which are so central to everything we do. We'll hear from our new National Disability Research Partnership board member, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, Professor Scott Avery from Girramar Indigenous Health at UTS. And he will speak to us about what needs to be done to embed First Nations leadership and self-determination across disability research. I'll tell you a little bit more about the 2026 disability funding round, because I know many in the room and many online are probably interested to hear more about how you can apply for this research. We'll talk a little bit more about how we're supporting disabled early career researchers completing a PhD and Masters of Research studies through the Disability Research Leadership Program. And we'll hear from Kelsey about the Citizen Researcher Essential course as well. These initiatives are connected by a simple principle. People with disability are not just participants in research. We are leaders, we are knowledge holders, and we are decision makers. In a moment, I'll briefly outline what's coming in the 2026 funding round and how people can engage with upcoming briefing sessions. But before I begin, Professor Anne Kavanagh has been an absolute rock in holding the vision for the National Disability Research Partnership. She was co-chair of the working party that helped birth, or it was a very long gestation, the National Disability Research Partner, and she was co-director of the establishment phase. Unfortunately, Anne can't be with us today. She had booked her tickets, but she's very unwell today. And she's asked me to say a few words on her behalf. And picture me as Anne. I might move my hands around a little bit. And I'm speaking in Anne's voice. When we began that work, the vision was clear. We wanted a national disability research program that was not peripheral. Trust in the leadership of people, not tokenistic, not extractive. We wanted research that was led by and with people with disability, research that shared power, research that mattered, and today we're seeing that take a tangible form. The 2026 Disability Research Funding Round represents a $5 million investment, but more than that, it represents trust. Trust in the leadership of people with disability, trust in our collective capacity to shape research priorities, and trust that evidence, when generated differently, can change systems. This round focuses on two areas that deeply affect everyday life: safety, including a specific focus on eliminating restrictive practices and strengthening safeguards, accessible and inclusive communities, and the structural conditions that determine whether people with disability can participate fully and equally. These priorities reflect what we've heard from years from advocates, researchers and community leaders. Again, I'm Anne. As chair of the research committee, which Anne is, I want to be clear. We are looking for proposals that are courageous, that share decision making, that are methodologically strong, and that are designed from the outset to influence policy and practice. Disability-led research is not a niche category, it's rebalancing of power. From a research committee perspective, we're seeking proposals that demonstrate genuine disability leadership in decision making, authentic co-design and shared governance, methodological rigour appropriate to the research question, strong ethical foundations, and clear pathways to policy and systems impact. Disability-led research is not an alternative to rigorous research. It is rigorous research and strengthens it. Embedding lived experience leadership enhances relevance, improves design, and increases the likelihood that findings will be translated into practice. Applications will be assessed through an independent multidisciplinary review process, including lived experience, academic and policy expertise using transparent and published criteria. Today's funding round is another step in embedding that shift nationally, and I, Anne, am proud to have been part of the establishment of the NDRP and the working party that imagined this organisation, and I'm proud to see how it is now funding research at scale. I'll now hand back to Mary, who's me, to outline how people can engage in the funding round. Thank you, Anne, and I hope you're watching. So, the Research Committee has played a critical role in ensuring this funding round is robust, independent and rigorous. And I'll talk through the funding in practical terms, because I know many of you are looking and excited and have been working on your partnerships and your co-design already. The National Research Partnership exists to build this inclusive system, and one of the biggest legacies of the Working Party and Anne and the other colleagues who are on the Working Party was that they developed a whole set of principles about what inclusive research means like. And so it's making sure it's done by people with disability, and it's also about strengthening capacity. And it's not saying that there's not capacity there already. There's lots of capacity for disability-led research, but how can we build momentum and scale? And also mobilising evidence for action. And as much, I'm not an academic, and as much as I love a good peer-reviewed publication, when any policymakers who are in the room, when they've got to write a brief in about 10 minutes, they don't have time to read through that peer-reviewed journal. So how do we provide evidence to policymakers in really accessible formats that's founded and based on the evidence, but in easy-to-use formats? And that's really critical to what we do. So as the Minister said, we're focusing on 2 research agenda areas. So our research agenda is very broad. It covers everything from education to homes and living, through to community attitudes, through to the NDIS, and so on and so forth. But we decided to focus our efforts for a number of reasons. Safety of people with disability, we saw the Royal Commission. We know that governments have impetus to act, and now is the time where we need to have really good evidence to support end users of research. But also we know at a time when states and territories are grappling with, well, what's their role in the disability landscape? Local government, for example. Inclusive and accessible communities is an absolute bedrock and foundation for inclusion. So we're delighted to focus on these 2 areas. But they're not abstract themes, as you know. They're about everyday life, they're about systems, and they're about power. And we know these topics link to other areas of the research agenda. For example, it's linked to education, it's linked to health, it's linked to the NDIS and community attitudes. And so the way, and I'm hoping you can see this, but I will talk it through, these topics, so what's being funded? So there's a $5 million funding round, and the projects are 12 months in duration and up to $300,000 per team. And there are 3 opportunities. There's an open round on safety where teams define their own research focus within the safety theme, and the total funding available for that is $2.4 million. There's also a targeted opportunity under safety, and that's focused on pathways to elimination of restrictive practices. And the total funding available there is for $600,000. And this is deliberate. We want restrictive practices, and a content note here, remain one of the most urgent systemic issues facing people with disability and policymakers as they grapple with how to change systems so restrictive practices can be eliminated and respond to those really powerful recommendations from the Royal Commission. The third opportunity is around accessible and inclusive communities. And again, teams here can define their own research, and the total funding available for that is $2 million. And again, up to $300,000 per project. As I said before, we are seeking research that can influence policy, regulatory reform, service models, and community systems. So, the guidelines will be available on our website on Monday. We'll be sending, if you're not already subscribed to our newsletter, please do. It's on our website. There'll be a very long email with all the links to the resources, and the application form will open next week too, the 23rd of February, although we don't expect anyone's going to open that on the first day. We hope you read the guidelines first. And that gives teams, it closes on the 20th of April, and it gives teams 8 weeks to prepare applications. And then projects will commence towards the middle of this year. We are very clear about the timelines because policy windows move quickly and research needs to be positioned to influence them. So what's in the guidelines? So this is your handbook. And it will be an essential guide as you and your teams are coming together to design the research. So what's in it? The application process, about the funding and the funding rounds, the eligibility criteria, and the assessment criteria. Please read them carefully as they will be your guidance about what we're looking for. This is a competitive funding round. As much as we'd like to fund everything, we can't, but clarity and alignment do matter. It's also really important, and I know we've got a number of our 2025 research funding teams in the room, you don't need to have received funding in our last round to apply for this round of funding. Any teams that are research teams that are designing disability-led research are welcome to apply for this research grant funding as long as research is aligned to the grant guidelines. So what do research teams look like technically? So each project must have an administrating organisation, a contact person, research team members, but also importantly partners. This is a partnership approach. This is not just about one team at one university coming up with a good idea. It's really about partners coming together. But it's not a hierarchy model. We expect genuine collaboration, shared governance and clear decision-making structures and meaningful disability leadership. If lived experience or expertise is advisory only, if you're only doing consultations, as much as consultation can be important, but if you're only doing that, that will be very evidenced in the assessment and probably unlikely to be funded. It has to be shared governance, shared leadership, and authentic, powerful roles for people with disability in the research. So why is collaboration important? It strengthens the quality, relevance and impact of research, and working together allows teams to bring together different expertise to fully understand the issue, develop clear and well-informed research questions, and include a diverse mix of people, including people with disability, organisations and researchers. So what does this mean in practice? Individuals can join a research team and contribute lived expertise, professional expertise and research skills. Organisations can apply as an administering organisation and manage the project funding, or as a partner organisation with a defined role in the work. The grant supports collaborative research teams that bring people together, but not limited to people with disability, people with lived expertise, including carers, family and kin, researchers, disability representative organisations, community organisations, project or policy officers from government who might want to join the project team or who you're already working with. I won't go into too much detail because I do really want to hear from Scotty, and this is stuff you'll be able to read. We've got things in our guidelines about what can be funded, but please do include in your budgets money for inclusive participation. If we don't see that you've got appropriate funding to support people with disability to authentically be involved in the research, it will show through. This is not just about paying the wages of people who are professional. This is about authentic paid roles for people with disability. Support for Easy Read, Auslan, captioning, interpreters, but also supporting the inclusion in the NDRP's community of practice. In short, we will fund what's necessary to make disability-led and inclusive research possible. Large subcontracting arrangements that undermine team governments and costs unrelated to the project won't be funded. And so you'll be able to read more in the guidelines, and I'll talk a little bit about the assessment criteria. And you'll see our first criteria, worth 20%, is relevance to the topic and potential for policy and systems impact. Research quality and methodology, leadership and inclusion of people with disability, capacity and resources to deliver the project, and risk management and value for money. So what we're really looking for is research that shifts systems, tests solutions, and generates evidence that governments, regulators and service providers can use and strengthen the disability research ecosystem. We're not looking for descriptive reports that provide no pathway to change. Be explicit about your impact strategy, be explicit about governance, and be explicit about who holds decision-making power. Our team is wrapping around a whole lot of information and support for the funding round. We're not just launching this round and then disappearing and saying, off you go and go do it. We have a number of future sessions scheduled, including a session on research by and with people with disability. We'll have Q&A drop-in sessions across March, so you can actually come and ask your questions about your research. We're holding 2 evidence to action sessions aligned to the funding themes of safety and accessible and inclusive communities. And all details will be on our website. You can contact us by email, phone or SMS. And just in terms of closing this segment before I move on to our friend Scotty, this funding round is about scale, but it's also about structural change. It reflects confidence in disability leadership, confidence in shared governance, and confidence that research, when done differently, changes outcomes. We look forward to seeing your ambitious applications, and thank you, and we look forward to working with many of you over the coming months. We now move on to our keynote address. It's a real privilege to introduce Professor Scott Avery. Scott is a Professor of Indigenous Disability Health and Wellbeing in the School of Public Health right here at UTS in Sydney. He's an Aboriginal man descendant from the Worimi people and is profoundly deaf. Dr. Scott, as he prefers to know, is a recognised educator, research and policy advisor on Indigenous cultural approaches for inclusion of people with disability. His groundbreaking publication, Culture is Inclusion, a narrative of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people with disability, has influenced national policy across Closing the Gap, Australia's Disability Strategy and the Royal Commission into Violence, Abuse, Neglect and Exploitation of People with Disability. He's been appointed as an expert advisor to numerous government bodies and he's advocated on Indigenous and disability rights at the United Nations. I'm also so pleased to share on behalf of our Chair Claire, who's up late at night overseas, that our board has appointed Scott as an independent director to the National Disability Research Partnership. Scott was helpful and integral in helping establish the NDRP as a member of the Working Party, and we're so delighted we'll be working with you on this. Today, in the context as we launch this funding round, First Nations partnerships and investment in leadership, Scott's perspective is both timely and essential. Please join me in welcoming Scott for our keynote address.
Good Jigu, which is hello and welcome in my native language of Gatang. Thank you so much for the warm welcome, Mary, and the invitation to speak. It was a broad brief I was given, how Indigenous knowledge can help shape an inclusive future in disability research. But I just want to add my acknowledgement that we are on Gadigal land and the traditional owners. I do want to thank, we have one of our finest elders in the room that I've ever met in my life, Auntie Glendra. Just grounds me in community. Our work we do, the stories that you bring, your personal experiences, the connection we have, it keeps the work we do real. And you also remind me, yes, it's my fault. I do want to acknowledge other Indigenous people who are in the room. I won't point you out by name, but I just want to acknowledge that there are deaf Indigenous elders and leaders in the room, and I notice and acknowledge your presence here, and any other Indigenous people who I haven't happened to catch the eye of. And also to acknowledge the presence of the Minister. It adds some gravitas to know that what we do in disability research in academic circles actually has an impact. And I have great respect for people who turn up. We are fundamentally relational people and people who turn up. And to you all who have turned up to listen today, I just want to acknowledge every single person's presence here. So the broad brief I was given was what can Indigenous knowledges, and I find our work when you're doing Indigenous and disability, it's a little bit inch thick, miles wide, so many things we could say. So I'm going to focus on three things, three contributions that I can see Indigenous knowledge could make. The first is an Indigenous culture of inclusion and well-being, a worldview of disability that is different to what many people are conditioned to. The second thing is our history and legacy of truth-telling. And the third is how we see the history, how our role in the history, how the present we have has had a past and our past has a future. And what we do now and what we do today will shape what the future generations. So the first contribution I want to talk about, and Mary had mentioned this in the introduction, is cultural inclusion. So the history of cultural inclusion, and it's a book that we wrote. I see this as not a piece of research as much, though I have to talk about this in the universities so it's recognisable. It's the story of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people with disability. Now, its origins came, so a long, long time ago in a career past, I was working on the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health plan. This is 2012. So this is the version of the health plan that says we envisage a health system free of racism. which was very much a breakthrough discourse, because it used to be, oh, what do you mean by that? Is that like non-discriminatory healthcare practices? And we're kind of going, oh, yeah, racism. And we still haven't got there with ableism yet. But when I was involved in that, the health groups were talking to the doctors, they were talking to OTs, they were talking to the physiotherapists, they were talking to the speech pathologists, they were talking to teachers, and going, are you actually talking to the people with disability? And their voice was completely absent. I remember doing my systematic research back then, is what you have to do for your PhD, and I found 4 articles that made any mention of First Nations and disability research. So this came, so we just said, oh, hang on, we can't rely on others to speak for ourselves, we have to do this ourselves. And we're kind of thinking, if we want to change the system, we actually have to start teaching, and we have to start teaching, we have to start writing the curriculum, and that means we play in the research space. So we came up with the idea, and we had one research question. We went to as many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as we could find and asked them, what is your story? And because that is something they've never been asked. Tell us your story on your terms, in your time and in your space. And we thought at the time it'd all be about the NDIS, because that was happening at that point of time. And it wasn't. People didn't talk about their disability. They talk about their experiences of being isolated and marginalised in their communities, not being able to access their communities because some of the basic public health infrastructure that we take for granted in places like where we are today were not available to them. Healthcare services that were not available, which chronic conditions like disability we would see as a health condition in a remote community where preventative health is not there, is actually seen as pre-disability because it'll just lead to amputations and So these were the stories that came, but there was a trend track to that story. One was we struggled to get access to systems that were not designed for us, but we had strength in our community. And we tell this story of culture's inclusion, and we tell it through an old ancient law, Olowari law, and we tell it the story of an ancient Mungo man. And so if you want to cast your mind around Indigenous disability, you have to cast your mind back 25,000 years. And so out in Western New South Wales, there's this archaeological site, and amongst it there are footprints in the clay. And what it is, amongst those footprints is this single right line of footprint. So right footprint, right footprint, right footprint, corresponding west footprint. And so they went and asked the Western archaeologists, they're going, what's going on here? We can't understand that, we've measured this. So someone had a really good idea and said, let's get some ancestral knowledge in. And they asked the elders of that group, the Wintubi people, and they'd, oh, that's a one-legged man and he's on a hunt. So the Western scientists went back and they measured and said, they're actually on a hunt. And having a role and responsibility in this community. And we saw this twin story to the social inequalities we have. We tell this because we still see this culture of inclusion. It speaks to a worldview which says every single person has a place and purpose on this earth. That is a worldview. So if I translate my experience as a deaf person, the medical scientific world, they give me these cochlear implants. That's what they are. They're not listening devices. I'm not a copper. Everyone calm down. And they give me this fancy Latin title that classifies my disease. It's called otosclerosis, which is a bone thing, which means my bones is ossified and I can't hear. So they give me that medical diagnosis. And what they do is they fix me. They see me, oh, I'm going to fix the deficit in your body by giving you something. And my research is to make the technical support that helps you communicate, helps you function. That's my medical model of research. In the cultural model of research, I'm not deaf or hearing impaired. I'm gifted by silence. So what I do is I can go to, we heard about country, I can go to the place where I feel safe and secure, where silence is my natural world. Now people think country's a place on a map. For me, I do this. I go to deaf country and I just go to this place where it's complete silence and it's the safest, secure place that I find in my life. And what I do is I own that place and no one can go there. And then I can come back in your Western world and do this and function in your world. Now, this is our philosophy, this is our knowledge that we bring. Now, the challenge for us is we see this as part of our culture, but the challenge for us is how do we bring this into policy and practice? How do we change our systems that will embrace that knowledge? Now, we have to do that. That's the work that we need to do as researchers. So that's the first contribution, is to get you all to buy in on a cultural knowledge of inclusion, a worldview where everyone has a place and purpose in this world. The second contribution that we can make is to give honour to our time-honoured tradition of truth-telling. Now, yesterday, people may be aware that there was a groundbreaking report that interrogated the impact and incidence of racism in the higher education sector. It was described by Aboriginal leaders as shocking but not surprising, and it spoke to some of the day-to-day barriers that if you are an Indigenous researcher living and working in the university sector, what you come up against, and how it manifested and presented itself in my research journey. We heard about cultural inclusion and it's spoken of wonderfully here, but it was not always like that. Not long after I published it, we copped the resistance. It's a bit of a third law of motion when you're doing social change. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So this was confronting. So when I was publishing it, getting grants or putting in papers, I would get the reply back, what you're doing is not really research. And again, this speaks to a deeper structural racism on the acceptance of Indigenous knowledges in a predominantly Western academic environment. And I get some comfort seeing the National Disability Research Partnership speak and embrace Indigenous knowledges, because it moves us to an optimism that those who continue to practice the belief that Indigenous disability knowledges is not really research, they may find themselves as not really relevant. That's the research, that's the experience of an Indigenous researcher, but I can point out to you the report that was not published yesterday or the day before or any day prior to that, and that is the incidence and impact of ableism in the higher education sector. And this is the great unspoken in education policy. This is the great unspoken in every university's social justice and inclusion framework, the avoidance of having a discussion around ableism. So how this part of my life presented in my research journey. I have always felt as a deaf person there's been this invisible wall around what I could and could not achieve as a researcher in a higher education system. Subtle things like leadership opportunities just passing by, and you kind of think, oh, is it just you? Is it just me? So I'd reach out and I'd go, when I was dealing with racism and Indigenous, I had plenty of Aboriginal professors and mentors and leaders I could turn to. And I'm kind of going, well, where are all the deaf people? And I did not have that. And kind of couldn't make sense of that, but every now and then something would slip through and let the secret out. So when I was doing my PhD, I had to submit an ethics submission, and I wanted to interview deaf people. And the response come back from the Health and Medical Research Committee I had submitted to, if you want to interview deaf people, then you need to establish procedures to determine that they have the capacity to participate in research. And at that point in time, the advent of the NDRP was coming. And I thought I'd be handy if I got a little bit of help with this. These do wonders, but it'd be great. And I was asked to fill in a hearing handicap audit, in which one of the questions was, how handicapped does your hearing make you feel? And so here the secret is out. These subtle kind of tacit presumptions that we do not have the capacity to speak for themselves. And I don't know, I'm still looking for the deaf mentor. I have not met another person in the academy, going to Canberra back and forwards, or in my executive life, I have not met one other person that has these cochlear implants. And I think that cannot be an accident. So that is the truth telling. Now I'm going to translate another piece of Indigenous knowledge you and reference it to the agenda that the National Disability Research Partnership wants to promote, inviting you as research leaders to submit grants on safety and inclusive communities. What Indigenous knowledge teaches us is that our personal agency and the habitat in which we live and work are inextricably linked. So researchers, we call that social determinants. Hopefully that's very clear. If you want to be prosperous and working, you need to be able to do it in a safe and inclusive environment. So what this means for you as research leaders and chief investigators is that if you want to have people with disability on your grant, you need to look beyond the scope of your immediate project. You need to start buying into building a safe and inclusive place for a principal site in which it's done. This means that you all need to sign up to dismantling ableism in higher education. And you need to be able to be confident to carry that discussion, not just within your groups, but in the whole institution and the sector that you need to overcome this awkward silence. And if I was to compare how racism is dealt with and responsive in this, and ableism, you are on your own if you challenge ableism. If you want to draw an angry crowd, start a conversation about racism. If you want to disband it, start one about ableism. That needs to change. And in reference to safety, I just want to point out, I'm not speaking against ableism because I feel safe and secure in doing so. I'm doing it actually in spite of not feeling safe. I'm doing it because even though I have a fancy academic title on my name, the torrent of ableism I see first-hand witness makes me ask, what else is going on? So that's the challenge, and that's the truth-telling that I think us as academics need to be much more vocal about leading. The third contribution, and I'm going to change the tone here, and this is the reference to when we give our acknowledgement of country, we give respect to our elders past, present and emerging. This is to say, the present we have has a history, have a past. We need to honour and respect that. That is so the next generation of disability researchers don't have to start again. We do that. Our change is progressive and intergenerational. And it is not perfect, and we will make mistakes, and I'm very accountable to the mistakes that I make. And we need to give our permission to do this. Social change is hard, and if you're feeling very uncomfortable by this discussion, you are actually paradoxically in the right mindset to make an impact. But our present has a past, and we'll have a future. And seeing and looking ahead into our future gives us a cause of optimism. So one of the things and programs that we're establishing in Girramar Indigenous Health is what we call the Saplings Program. So our listening to community was people would come to us and they would say, I'm really interested in youth justice. I've got this idea. And we're going, what's your project? And going, I don't know. And there was no place for them to cultivate that and give them the space. The universities wanted to turn them up with a proposal, we'll give you a scholarship, but they actually had no coaching and mentoring them, this safe space to give them time to develop the confidence to speak to their proposal. So we have this saplings program. We called it saplings because we really wanted to make this a greenhouse for people who have the aspiration. And as at time of writing yesterday, applications still open, we had 11 applicants coming from our First Nations disability community. Of those, 5 have identified as having a disability. And the narrative was, look, if I can choose one, I'm deaf and have a hearing impairment. I started something, but I didn't feel supported. The message we are saying to them is research is hard. You need to do the work. But if you come and you do that work, we believe in you. Your community will back you. So it's not just giving them the technical skills, it's building that belief. And that is something they have not always heard. So that's a cause of optimism. And this is something that we see aligns with the values of the National Disability Research Partnership. The second thing is we do not just do research, we stand in front of classrooms of students about this big and we teach this. And our students, they're not putting with this non-exclusion stuff, they are actually inclusion as part of there. So this is not negotiable. You do not need to teach us why certain parts of our body work differently to others. We've worked that out. You do not need to teach us about Indigenous culture. We are people of our community. We know that. We want you to teach us how can we change the system? How can we make an impact? What is our part and our role in the journey? Teach us what has come before us so we can take this journey into the future. And that gives us optimism, and they're choosing to come. And I think they will be our greatest allies. If we get it wrong, they will be our greatest critics because they will write our history. And finally, I just want to say why I have signed up to the National Disability Partnership. And this comes from my community. I'm not long from coming back from Western New South Wales, trip to Wilcannia. And you go to those remote places and some of the disability access hasn't changed since when I did my PhD in 2017. Still the inaccessible, still where is the NDIS? And they said to me, so we don't want slogans anymore. We actually want to see stuff done. And I think this is where I'm signing up and optimistic. Not only is the National Disability Sydney has turned up with a vision, values, it is in the hands of community. It's giving us the resources to make a difference. So with that, I just want to say thank you, Maramboo Nyanyabu, for the opportunity. I see iconic disability researchers, so it has been quite humbling to stand in front of you and address you today and your respectful listening. So congratulations again to Mary and the National Disability Research Partnership. All power to you and all power to you who wish to be part of it.
Thank you very much, Scott. And sorry I had to race outside because we've got SBS here who are going to be telling the story of what we're doing today, and they're going to be interviewing Scott after this as well. So I'll just hold it for 5 minutes for questions. But we now have a time for a few questions for Scott. If anyone who is online, Sue will introduce those questions, and Jess is in the room with the microphone, and if you're going to ask a question, we need the microphone so that can go through. So would someone like to ask a question of Scott? Up the back, Sharon?
I'm just going to read the captioning, is that okay?
Absolutely, Scott. Well, thank you very much for your presentation. And my name is Sharon Kerr, and I'm a non-Aboriginal woman working with the Black Ability team in the University of Melbourne, looking at disability there. I'm just wondering, Scott, you've talked about what we can learn from Indigenous knowledges of disability. For all the people here who are going to, and online who are going to be putting in research applications, how do you feel they should embrace Indigenous participation, not just consultation, but participation in their projects.
One of the differences between, if you like, Western approaches and methodologies of research is very procedure. Step 1, step 2, do your literature review, do this. Very different to how you would approach Indigenous research. Indigenous people generally are foremost relational. And we kind of have a view of the world that if you get the relationship right, things will happen. So work on the relationship first. And this is some of the reason why I'm here today. And I said you work on the relationship. And it gives us a safe place to have some of the awkward discussions, because we also understand that we're Indigenous cultures, but we live in a predominantly different system. So there is this cultural clash that we have to navigate. But we have the relationship to navigate that together. There's no hierarchy, there's no this. We understand that there's systemic ways of doing things, but we need to see progress and change. So first and foremost is to get the relationship. The other thing is you carry that relationship right through to the end. And one of the interesting things, it's probably a version of structural racism and ableism, is every scoping, systematic review I see people form teams, research teams, and they say, oh, we're talking to Indigenous people or people with disability. And I pick up their publication and I look at their citation and I go, who has shaped and formed your knowledge? And I just don't see the people with disability in that list. Again, it's like we've invited you in to tell your stories, but we will be the gatekeepers of the knowledge. And I think this is the subtle structural barriers that we have to break through. We don't just want to be tourists in here. We actually want to make difference. We want to actually have. This is a deeper concept than than lived experience. Lived experience is me telling you about my story, and then you going away and doing what you can with it. Experiential knowledge going, my knowledge is not just of my community, but my experience of having to navigate systems that were not designed with me in mind is a form of knowledge as well. And you need to capture that experience of knowledge. It's not just this subject matter here. Change and social change needs to draw on that experiential knowledge as well. And we see it in ways we probably can't explain, but we know when there's strong and respected relationships. So that's our roundabout way, our Indigenous people, blackfellas, storytelling answers your question, I hope.
Thank you very much, Scott. We've got time for one more question in the room for you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kathleen. I am an autistic ADHD woman. I work for DARE Disability Services, and I am a 1-week-old PhD student. Yeah, I'm going to replay that clap a lot. My question is around, I guess, getting a seat at the table. I've just left the education system as a secondary school teacher, and I've had a lot of conversations and done a lot of work with neurodivergent students, senior students particularly. As a neurodivergent person myself, I decided to put the money where my mouth is and not only disclose that, but to ask for accommodations and to be included in that conversation, which was point blank denied. How do we find people, our people, my people, and what are some of the ways we can get a seat at the table? Because I want one.
Keep going. It'll be hard, but when you think quit, just remember you're doing this not just for you, for your community. You're an icon and role model of your community. remember, for every person that says you don't have a seat, there's many, many others who want you there in your community that you're making a difference for. That's the first response to your question. You can control the quality of your work and the integrity and self-accountability. Essentially, that is what you can do. In time, you will learn that you can't change things on your own. And this is why I said to everyone else who's listening in on the conversation that we're having right now, if you do not have a seat at the table, but there are other people in this room who do have, they should be asking people, who else are people at that table, why is that not the case? And we find that if we're not in the room, and I see this with the Disability Royal Commission, I have seen groups and I've heard groups by accident that are talking about First Nations disability implementation, and I'm going, and people come up to me and they said, oh, why weren't you there? And I said, oh, I didn't know about it. And I go, did you actually say anything? And that's where we need others to speak up on our behalf, because if we're not in the room, we need others to go, hang on, they need to be represented in that voice. And when you get in that room, speak the truth. You do not turn up for the solutions, but you do not need to compromise on the values and principles of your community. That's the best advice I've been able to come up with.
Thank you, Scott. That is great advice, actually. We're just about out of time. Thank you. So excited you're joining our board. So excited about our partnership with Girramar at UTS. Like to acknowledge Jasmine as well. Thank you, Jasmine. Your contribution today reminds us this is not just a technical issue, and it's relational, structural, cultural and profoundly human. So thank you, Scott. For those of you here in the room, we're taking a short 10-minute break, and the people online will be taking a 10-minute break. There are some refreshments, but there will be lots of time for mingling at lunch, so we will be herding you like cats back into the room. And after, we're going to hear from some people who are doing the really exciting research work and the development work. So thanks, everyone, and we'll see you after the break in 10 minutes from now. In the room, it's 10:33, so at... Oh, I'm terrible at maths. Someone help me. 10:43. Okay, thanks, everyone. Okay, we're going to get started again. And Sue, who's online, will be helping all our people online get ready again. It's now my very great pleasure to introduce a really critical partner for us, Dr. Chelsea Chapman, who's a research fellow at Griffith University. Kelsey is going to provide an overview of the co-design of the Citizen Researcher Essential course that has been co-designed with people with disability at Griffith University, and we're delighted to be sponsoring this wonderful initiative. So after Kelsey, we'll be going on to some other speakers, so please do stay with us. And at the end of this session, we'll have about 20 minutes for questions and answers. And you can get into the nitty-gritties in your questions and answers if you like about the research funding. We're happy to help. So this showcase, an initiative, recognises something equally important. People with disability don't just contribute to research, they have the right to shape it. Citizen Research Essentials is Australia's first co-designed disability-led micro-credential, specifically for people with disability who want to engage in, influence or lead disability research. And we're very proud to be partnering with Kelsey and the team at Griffiths. Like the Disability Research Leadership Program, the NDRP is seeking to support research capacity strengthening across all parts of the disability research ecosystem. So I'm delighted to invite Kelsey to briefly introduce the partnership and what this resource enables, And Kelsey has played an important role in the development of the Citizen Research Essentials, helping to ensure this course generally reflects the principles we've spoken about today: co-design, accessibility and lived experience. Kelsey is an early career researcher and research fellow at Griffith University in the Inclusive Futures program. Her work focuses on disability inclusion, health and transport systems, and improving mainstream services for marginalised community. Her research spans disability policy and service experiences, outcomes and intersectional equity, including work with First Nations communities. She's committed to ensuring research is not only methodologically strong, but ethically grounded, accessible and impact. So I'd like to hand over now to Kelsey, who's going to give us a bit of an overview.
I hate to follow Scott, so I'm glad there was a morning tea to break things up. But thank you, Mary, and to the National Disability Research Partnership for inviting me to speak with you all today. I am a 35-year-old woman with long, dark hair that's in a ponytail, and I'm wearing a bright blue suit, very bright, with a white shirt underneath, and I'm speaking to you from a podium today. It's really wonderful to be here today to introduce the Citizen Research Essentials course, a course that represents years of conversations and leadership of people with disability who wanted more support and more out of the research system. This course was co-designed by some of my colleagues and I at Griffith University with people with disability, and we're very proud to be sponsored by the National Disability Research Partnership. I want to tell you a little bit about the course and how it came to be, because I think that's part of the story here, and then we'll talk about what it is and how you can get involved. The course didn't start out as a curriculum idea. I'm not much of a curriculum or pedagogy-based person, so luckily we have some good colleagues who help with that. But it really started out as a gap that people with disability, our citizen researchers and research partners, pointed out to us repeatedly, that people with disability are so often asked to contribute to research and participate, but rarely given the trainings or tools to truly lead it. This came across really clearly by one of our citizen researchers who acquired an impairment during their education, and so that pathway was ruptured for them. And returning to an education environment was particularly challenging because we heard Dr. Scott speak about the ableism inherent in higher education. And so this course is a way to start bridging some of those gaps. It was created to address that gap, and from the outset, it has been a co-designed effort. So it was led by people with disability who already had lots of research experience and were generous enough to share what they wish they had known before they ever got involved for the first time. So this is the concepts, the skills, and practical guidance about how research works, how lived experience can really shape and drive decisions, and how to help create shared context, because as researchers, we have lots to learn from our research partners. We're very happy to announce that Citizen Research Essentials is free, thanks to the sponsorship of the National Disability Research Partnership. And it's a disability-led online micro-credential, self-paced. It is across 7 modules for participants with disability to build skills needed to shape what gets researched, how studies are designed, what questions are asked, and how results are interpreted and shared. It also asks them to reflect on what they value out of their research partners and how to have some of those difficult and awkward conversations to demand things of us. To take this course, you don't need an academic background, formal training, or any sort of educational experience that qualifies you for this. What qualifies you for this course is your lived experience, your insight, and your curiosity. The co-design process enabled us to design this course with accessibility at its core, and we're really proud of that. We know that it's probably not perfect for everyone, and so we're happy to hear from you about the ways we can continue to improve. But participants can learn at their own pace with captions, transcripts, and Auslan interpreted videos. There's a mix of written and visual content and a structure that supports diverse learning styles in your own time. Importantly, like I mentioned, the sponsored places are available for NDRP co-designers. And more information is going to be available in the coming weeks about expressing your interest. However, our expression of interest form is currently live on our website, and so feel free to pop your contact details in there. One of the most exciting opportunities the course helps create is actually formal recognition of people with disability as research leaders. So people who complete the course can receive a Griffith University micro-credential. That's a digital badge. We've all seen them in your email signatures and on your LinkedIn, but it's a professional recognition. And this really acknowledges people with disabilities' expertise and contribution as skilled partners in ethical, inclusive, and high-quality research. The core of this course is not really about badges or modules, although that's how we're delivering it. It's really about shifting power. And it's about supporting a research culture where lived experience is not something consulted at the margins. It's something that's meaningfully led and drives research. It's about people with disability leading when research agendas are set, when methods are chosen, and where findings can influence policy and practice. And it's providing skills to create that shared context. And it's also about opening the door widely, making sure that the barrier is never cost, confidence, or inaccessible learning. We are incredibly grateful to the co-designers who shared their wisdom, to my academic colleagues who helped co-design the course as well, to the Griffith University Center for Collaborative Educational Excellence for their support, and especially to Mary and the team at the NDRP for seeing the potential and value in this course and supporting us to support people with disability in research. Citizen Essentials is more than a course, like I said. It is about strengthening voice, supporting leadership, and ensuring that research in Australia is shaped with and led by people with disability. We are really excited to welcome people with disability from across the country into the course and cannot wait to see where citizen researchers continue to lead us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kelsey, and there will be time to ask Kelsey some questions at the end as well. I'm so proud of the next showcase we're going to give you. All of what we're doing today, but particularly this one is very near and dear to my heart. The Disability Research Leadership Program is the first time we understand that there's a disability-specific research leadership program for people with disability in Australia who are early career researchers. I'm sure there's been others, and I'm sorry if I'm claiming it and it's the first, but I'm going to claim it. It's an important day. This program was most importantly shaped by lived experience. It was shaped by consultation with past and current PhD and master's degree research students with disability who shared their experiences, barriers, and what supports would make the biggest difference to their careers. We listened to the feedback and we received through the consultation and used it to support the design of the program. And we found 6 key areas where change and support are most needed for research students with disability. Flexible support. So many programs are for full-time students, and for part-time students, they're missing out. And flexible in the way that students with disability need. Overcoming financial barriers and the significant financial barriers that students with disability face. Connection and community and connection to other students. Clear information. The important role of supervisors, and I'm looking at one here in the room, and the key role they can and cannot play in supporting the research of students. There's some structural challenges, responsive university disability support services, and so this first intake of our national cohort of higher degree researchers with disability is based on what we heard. So successful applicants will receive $15,000 in cost of living support. It's around helping with the everyday basics and to help them to actually stay in, we know that it is really difficult to manage part-time work as well as study as well as the cost of living crisis. And then up to $15,000 flexible funding to support their research and professional development, including activities like conference travel, collaboration with disability organisations, embedding accessible research methods and knowledge mobilisation into their research, and a national community of practice connecting with peer researchers, disability leaders, sector experts who share their commitments to driving change. This program is about removing barriers so talent, disability leadership and research excellence can thrive. Like everything, we had more demands than what we could meet. We had 55 excellent applications for this program, which really shows the demand and need for this type of program for research students with disability. We had such a strong field, and I would have loved if we could have funded all 55, but unfortunately we didn't have the budget to be able to do that. The independent assessment panel had the tough job of recommending candidates for funding, and 14 were recommended, which was more than the 8 positions we originally advertised. I would like to reassure any applicants who are not accepted for the program that your research and work is highly valued, and we hope in future years, subject to further funding, that we may be able to offer further opportunities. In the meantime, we hope you can stay connected to the NDRP, our activities, events and work. So on screen, I'm delighted to announce our inaugural 2006 recipients, and we have some of them in our room today. And I'm going to take some time and I know we might have some online and some unsuccessful candidates too. And so I'm going to read a little bit about each person, and so bear with me because this is really important. So our first candidate is Michaela Sedgwick, a Gamilaroi PhD student researching health, wellbeing and experiences of discrimination among Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people with disability. And she's from Yadahuru Walani at ANU Canberra in ACT. Then we have Alison Devitt, a researcher designing chronic disease supports with people with intellectual disability, and they're at Charles Sturt University in Orange in New South Wales. Tara Pattenden is an artist researcher creating accessible tactile musical instruments at the Queensland Conservatoire, can't say that word, the music place where they go and play music at Griffith University in Brisbane. Stephen Manane is a researcher examining neurodiversity affirming behaviour support practices from Flinders University. Matthew Jackman is a PhD candidate understanding the contemporary international MAD movements at the University of Sydney. Sarah Poyner is a researcher improving intimate partner violence screening for autistic women at Griffith University. Kim Andreasen is a PhD candidate designing trauma-informed consent education for young people with disability at Curtin University in WA. Samantha Lilly is a researcher exploring obesity and intellectual disability lived experience using co-design from Deakin in Melbourne. Aaron St James, who's here with us in the room, is a researcher examining inclusive teaching, accessibility and learning design to improve university experiences for students with disability from the University of New South Wales. Katie Price, I think Katie might be here as well, is a PhD candidate researching possible reconciliation of disability rights and mental health detention in preventing suicide, at UTS here. Claire Dorling is a legally blind researcher developing strength-based vision assessment tools from Monash, and I think Claire might be either online or in person. Tanya Rose is a researcher studying wellbeing of the disability arts practitioners from the University of Sydney. Hannah Vogel, I think Hannah's here, is an archaeology challenging ableism and reinterpreting disability in ancient history at Macquarie University. And last but not least, Mark Hansen is a PhD candidate and wheelchair user investigating wheelchair accessibility within air travel from Swinburne. So congratulations to everyone. And thank you. It's so exciting, this program. But I wanted to turn to what's next, because this is not the end. Today we've introduced the inaugural higher degree research cohort, an important milestone, but this was a program always intended to be more than a single stream. The Disability Research Leadership Program is about building structural pathways. Historically, people with disability have faced barriers at every stage of the research pipeline, from entering higher degree study to securing postdoctoral positions and influencing policy settings. So we are working on change that. So what's next? Our first cohort that we've announced today are not only just funded, but they're connected into national networks, mentorship and policy-facing opportunities. And for any policymakers who are here, and I know some of you are, we want to connect you with some of our students as well. And it's an opportunity for them to co-design what the program's going to look like and what the peer support will look like, based on their specific needs and preferences. Soon, we'll be announcing our second intake of the leadership program for postdoctoral fellows, designed to support early career researchers with disability to consolidate their academic profile, strengthen translation capability and step into leadership roles. And more information will be coming soon about that. Because if we're serious about disability-led research, we must also be serious about disability-led research leadership. And that requires infrastructure, mentorship, opportunities and sustained investment. The Disability Research Leadership Program is one part of building that infrastructure nationally, and we look further to sharing details about the postdoctoral stream in the coming months. So a very, very huge round of applause to our successful candidates. And we can't wait to get to know you all as we go on with this program. Our next and final profile is around safety of people with disability and co-designing research with the NDRP funding. And we're now going to turn back to our focus on safety, and in particular what disability-led co-design research looks like in practice. Throughout the morning we've spoken about structure, governance and opportunity, but ultimately this work is about real lives, real systems and real change. So our first funding round in 2025 was to fund what normally doesn't get funded, to fund the co-design, to fund people coming together and working out, well, what should this research be about? And we also funded two projects to synthesise the evidence on the topic of safety, and Sharon's here in the room who's looking at First Nations people within the prison system. So our next segment brings that to life. You'll hear from 3 of our 15 funded teams first, and it's my very great pleasure to introduce Dr. Jessica Moulton, a research fellow at Monash University. Jess leads a team for the project Reproductive Justice and Neurodivergence, a powerful, important piece of work that explores autonomy, access and safety through a neurodivergent lens. This project reflects what we mean when we're talking about disability-led. I'm going to invite Jess to say a few words before we play the video.
Excellent. Thank you, Sue. Thanks for the opportunity to speak on our project. So our project really does fit within the safety theme, as ultimately we're trying to improve safety for the neurodivergent community. So our project explores issues of bodily autonomy, access rights, but also more importantly, the systems and the barriers that people experience. And all these areas are very under-researched, but also deeply personal to the community. So importantly, the project has been co-designed and shaped by lived experience and partnership from the very beginning, and this is something that was only really possible with the NDRP funding. We're incredibly lucky to have a community reference group of 10 neurodivergent community members across 3 states in Australia, and they've really generously shared their insights to guide our research topics, questions, and the methods based on what they know is important and what matters to the community. So shaped by our community reference group and the lived experience experts from our original grant team, we've also built really strong and supportive research partnerships that we hope will continue as we move this work forward. I also want to make sure that you also heard from other members of our NDRP funded team who couldn't join us today, as I think their insights really speak directly to why disability leadership is so important in this kind of research. So in the video, you'll hear about why this topic matters, how they approach the co-design, and what safety means in the context of sexual and reproductive health rights and justice for neurodivergent people. We'll now play the video, and thank you, Sue. I'll pass it back on to you.
Safety of people with disability and co-designing research with NDRP funding. In 2025, NDRP funded 15 disability-led research projects across Australia. Led by and with people with disability, these projects are building evidence and co-designing future research to drive change in safety, in access and inclusion. Today, we highlight 3 examples. The first project is a knowledge synthesis project, Barriers Within Bars, Indigenous People with Disability in Prison. Project lead, Associate Professor Shalar Daniel Mays, lead organisation University of Melbourne in partnership with Access Able Braille Enterprises. Introducing Associate Professor Shalar Daniels Mays to explain more about the project.
It's co-designed, it's co-produced, it's very much about cultural safety, it's very much about disability confidence. So being able to then sort of take what we're learning from Black Ability overall to the work of working with those in prison or having experienced prison has been a real leap forward in knowledge creation. We're conducting 3 focus groups and we're working with people who are academics, researchers. We're working with professional people. We're talking with family members, community advocates, legal services, and we're also talking with prisoners and ex-prisoners who have lived experience of disability and the criminal justice system.
Our second project is co-designing future research about Sometimes I'm Too Safe, exploring the dignity of risk. Project lead, Professor Rhonda Faragher, lead organisation, University of Queensland, in partnership with Down Syndrome Australia and Down Syndrome Queensland. Introducing Alana Pettigrew, lived experience researcher, who explains what the topic means to her.
People also need to try new things. Sometimes they will make mistakes and they can learn from mistakes. We need to find a balance between being safe and being allowed to try new things and or choose to do things we want to do. We want to help parents, support workers and friends to know how to let people with intellectual disabilities to take risks but still be safe.
The third project is co-designing future research about reproductive justice and neurodivergence. The project lead is Dr. Jessica Moulton. The lead organisation is the University of Melbourne in collaboration with the University of Technology, Sydney and University of Queensland, in partnership with Sexual Health and Family Planning ACT, Sexual Health Quarters WA and Sexual Health Victoria. Introducing Dr. Jessica Moulton to explain what the project is about.
So our project is guided by our community reference group, which is made up of our neurodivergent community members, and we really want to try and understand the barriers that people currently face when accessing sexual and reproductive health care and making choices about their bodies, lives and relationships. And we also want to try and uncover what safe and supported care looks like in order to improve outcomes and people's safety. Our research is about identifying where systems fall short and co-designing solutions that can actually make a policy and service delivery impact.
Introducing Ricky Spencer, a member of the Consumer Reference Group for this project. We asked Ricky why this work is important.
Hi everyone, my name is Ricky Spencer and I'm an Indigenous trans woman. And I'd like to mention a little bit why it's important to really understand the importance of reproductive health care for those who are neurodivergent and those who perhaps present in non-binary different expressions of gender when accessing important health care. One of the key messages, and as a member of the Consumer Advisory Group, that I think is important is understanding how we may communicate differently. Sometimes we may not be able to express ourselves clearly, but we are still people who care deeply, want to have children and raise children and make very good parents. All we want is to be given an opportunity to be part of reproductive health so we can help shape our future generations. Thank you.
Introducing Stephanie Divmov, Research Fellow and PhD candidate at the University of Melbourne. Steph is a key member of the team co-designing the research proposal. We asked Steph, what have you learned through this work?
So through this work, I've learned that many of the harms that neurodivergent people experience in reproductive and sexual health care don't come necessarily from individual clinicians, but from systems built around assumptions. So this might be things like being spoken over, having capacity questioned, or having decisions made without clear and accessible information. I've also learned how much changes when lived experiences shapes the research from the beginning. So it helps shift the questions that we ask in research. So this might be to do with consent, how we communicate as a team, and also around the choices that we make in the research as well. And really it changes how safety is understood too. So from managing risk in research to supporting autonomy and trust in the broader sort of research space. For me, this work matters because it shows what's possible when research is led by and with the people most affected, and importantly, when their experience is recognised as essential and not optional.
Introducing Cardi Whalen, Disability Team Lead at Sexual Health Victoria, a partner in this project. Cardi is a key member of the team co-designing the research proposal. Cardi talks about why this work is important.
This project is different than any project I've worked on before. By supporting neurodivergent voices in the ownership of research, especially on sensitive topics like reproductive rights, we're creating connections. It's not just professionals or academics coming in from the outside. It helps to create a connection with the participants and community if they can see themselves reflected in research. If people with neurodivergence can see that they've been included from the outset as research partners and project members, then others from the community are more likely to embrace the research, take on the outcomes, and then apply them in real world settings, relating in more on the ground change for people with neurodivergence. This project embraces the saying, nothing about us without us, and I'm really proud to be a part of this project group.
Dr. Jessica Moulton explains why the project is disability-led.
I think disability-led research is really important, particularly in this space, is because often safety in terms of sexual and reproductive health gets framed in terms of risk. And when neurodivergent people aren't involved in the research, it misses what people actually find to be safe, respectful, and inclusive care. When lived experience shapes the research, it helps the research to stay grounded in real-world experiences and will allow us to identify neurodivergent people's priorities in this space and also the real barriers they experience when accessing care and trying to make informed choices about their bodies and their lives. So it shifts the focus away from managing risk to actually determining whether people have real choice, whether they feel respected, and whether they're actually able to make informed choices about their bodies, lives, and relationships. So by centering neurodivergent perspectives, we can actually design systems that adapt to people rather than people having to constantly adapt to the system or have to be constantly advocating for themselves.
To our 2025 funded teams, thank you. Thank you for your generosity in sharing your work. Thank you for your leadership in showing what research by and with people with disability truly looks like in practice. We have been wowed by your energy, your enthusiasm, and the sheer effort you have invested. We cannot wait to see your final reports and, more importantly, the change your work will continue to drive. It is February 2026. Many teams are already preparing their applications for this new funding round. Across Australia, people with disability, researchers, advocates and community partners are coming together, ready to lead the next wave of disability research. The momentum is building, and this is just the beginning.
Thank you to everyone who was involved in that video and to all our teams who are here today and online. I know there's many of you. You're doing great work and we're so excited to be working with you. We thought it was important to share what we're learning in practice. And thank you very much, Jessica, and to your team as well. We now have some time for questions. And if you're here in the room, we'll hand you a microphone, and if you could please wait, but it might be nice if you introduce yourself and where you're from as well. If you're joining online, please place your questions in the chat and the team will bring them forward. We welcome questions about our 2026 research funding, co-design expectations, anything you've heard from today that you'd like clarified. And so very happy to open it up now. We will alternate between online and in the room questions. Sue Tabe, our Deputy CEO, will be helping out here. You've heard a lot from me today and hopefully she might be able to answer some questions as well. And so Sue, and that was her beautiful voice narrating that video as well. I do have to give her a bit of kudos for that. So we'll open it up. If you could please keep your answers, your questions concise, and we'll try to be concise in our response as well. Okay, we've got one over here.
Hello, my name's Katie. I'm from the University of Newcastle. I'd love to ask a question of Kelsey, and that is, I'm really excited about the micro-credential, and I'm wondering what the specific sort of topics that are covered in it in order to empower our citizen researchers.
Thanks, Katie. So there's 7 modules, like I mentioned, and it goes on a bit of a Research 101 journey. So we start off with what a citizen researcher might be and what some of the roles you might be asked to take on and what some of the values that are important to you. So it's a bit of like a self-reflection exercise as well as a learning experience. We cover off on things like what are ethics applications? Why do we have to do them? What sorts of elements go into an ethics application? And to be honest, it's a really great review for us academics as well. We go through data collection methods. So what's quantitative research and what's qualitative research? And what are some of the methods that your research partners might talk to you about? What do they mean? And how might you expect or want to be involved in the design and delivery of those methods? We talk about data analysis. So again, same thing. What are the rigorous data analysis methods that your team might be using? How could you be included in that? How should you be leading that sense making? And then we have a number of different videos and links to resources that are outside of Griffith, so from some of our other partners, that people can take away with them. So some checklists, some really useful tools to keep in mind when they're going into co-design meetings or research team discussions. So it's really the whole kind of overarching research process. We also do have a module around translation and dissemination and how to speak up for yourself in the translation, how to become an author on publications, and also advocate for accessible dissemination for people with disability.
Thanks very much, Kelsey. Sue, I'll go to you online. Have we got any online questions?
Sue speaking. Just while Kelsey's still on her feet, I was hoping she could clarify what support is available for people with intellectual disability who want to do the micro-credential and how they might set themselves up for success to complete the micro-credential, please.
Thanks, Sue. Great question. So we do acknowledge that the content is in plain language. It is not an easy read. And so one of the things that we encourage is for people to do this together and to do it with support if they want. So we do have our team lead, Rebecca Barker, in the room with us today, who is available for people to engage with and ask questions online. And there are some supports embedded. It's in a Canvas platform, if people know the learning platform Canvas. We are really encouraging people to, as Dr. Scott spoke about, create relational community around this. So some of the things that we are going to be doing is unpacking some of the meatier concepts together, like the ethics module and the data collection and analysis modules in online kind of office hour style sessions so people can come and ask questions. The goal is we want this to be fun, fun-ish, but really we want you to come away with a positive experience. And so doing that in community is really important. So we're really encouraging of teams to get a group of their researchers, citizen researchers together, do it collaboratively. There is no overlord from Griffith University watching to make sure you've done this on your own. That's not the point of this. The point is specifically for people with intellectual disability to do this in the way that suits them.
Thank you, Kelsey. I think we've got another question in the room.
Jess speaking. I'm going to read a question out from Celia from the Australian Institute of Health and Wellbeing. So Mary, are there any plans for connecting the funded research to decision makers who could make changes?
Thank you very much. And absolutely, that's a core part of what we our work. We don't just fund the research. We look to broker and bridge connections. I know we've got people here from the NDIS Quality and Safety Commission, for example, Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, senior people within the department. We want to broker those connections so that you can have direct relationships and think about how policymakers might be involved in your research project. Often, and one of the criteria is about policy and practice impact. And so if you've spoken to policy folks and you know what they need, you can talk about that in your application. They may have published reports about what's missing. Use those references in your answer so you've made a real, okay, well, this is a regulation issue. And so who's going to be interested in this research? Maybe the NDIS Commission, maybe state and territory ombudsman and guardians, for example. We will work to help support our funded teams make those connections as much as we can, because those connections, like Scott said, are relational as well. And we want to move research teams, people with disability and policymakers much more melded together, and they're jointly thinking about what research is needed. So I hope that answers your question, Celia. And Sue Tape, our Head of Evidence to Action and Deputy CEO, is charged with that, and she's a master matchmaker. We'll do another question online, Sue.
Sue speaking, thank you. Changing topic slightly, this question was pre-submitted before the event and comes from an early career researcher with disability. And the question is, do researchers need to have an existing track record of grant funding to be considered for NDRP research funding? For example, if seeking a smaller funding amount for a pilot project with a partner organisation.
Thank you, Sue. That's a really great question, because you'll note on our application, we're not asking you to put Chief Investigators 1, 2, 3 or whatever the category is. We're not interested in hierarchy, we're interested in the impact. And so the lead of the project might be an early career researcher. You might think, oh, well, I do need to draw on some other experience, but it's about the collective of the team. It's not about individuals. So what are you bringing as a team? If it's a partnership with an organisation like a disability representative organisation, what are they bringing to the table? what is your research team? What are people? It's not about individuals, it's about the collective of the team. So we're not assessing individual people in our research grants, it's the team. And I couldn't emphasise that more. We want strong teams and the collective teams, and we would encourage early career researchers to apply as well. Thanks, Sue. Any questions in the room?
Thank you very much for today. My name is Bassem from Belongside Families. We support parents of kids with disabilities. One of the main questions that a lot of people with disabilities come from cold communities or from refugee or newly migrant communities that might not know how to navigate the system, might actually, keep people with disabilities or the kids with disabilities a bit away from the mainstream or from society because of whatever taboos that exist. So what do you do to break those barriers, and how can you get their voices included in basically all the research that's being funded? Thank you.
Thanks, Bassem, and I might answer that question with some examples. Two of our funded teams in 2025 are specifically working with culturally and linguistically diverse communities. One's in the Shepparton area where there's a large refugee and asylum seeker community. That's a partnership between the community health centre, the research teams, cultural liaison workers. This is where the team bit gets the really important thing. What's the collective team bringing? Another one is that we've funded is National Ethnic Disability Alliance is looking at the experiences of older people with disability in aged care, for example. And so I think the best way we can actually bring this research to life is to work with organisations like yours and others who are working with community, and that in my previous role, I was CEO of Children and Young People with Disability Australia, and we used to get approached by a lot of researchers saying, will you partner on this research with us? Really, the way they wanted to partner was us to recruit participants. They weren't as interested, not all, of course, we had many great research partnerships. Those that were quality partnerships involved us in the design of the research and drew on our expertise about what we knew about our community. So that's why we're taking a partnership approach. It's not just a team of researchers coming from, not just, I shouldn't say that. It's not about two universities coming together partnering, but not involving organisations that are at the coalface with community, because better research will be designed if it's informed by that lived experience. So I hope that answers your question, Bassem. Over to you, Sue. Anything?
Sue speaking. I just remembered that I was drinking my coffee on the camera for everybody in the room, so thank you for your patience with that, everyone. The next question is, and maybe this is for Kelsey again, sorry. Is there an equivalent training program for academic researchers to work effectively with the diversity of people with disability? The lack of knowledge and skills of academics can be a significant barrier to effective co-design.
Thanks, Sue. And yes, it's just not ready yet. So under construction, it is something that we have talked about for a long time in our team, and something that particularly as an early career researcher, I feel really strongly about. The initial targeting will be at HDR students, ECRs, and people new to working with the disability community and doing co-design. So that's going to be the primary intake group. And this is so that especially ECR researchers can feel supported in what's kind of this wild west of co-design, figuring out what makes it rigorous, how to do it effectively, but also how to do it inclusively. So coming soon.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kelsey. Any other questions in the room? Rachel.
Hi, Rachel Spencer from National Centre of Excellence in Intellectual Disability Health. Mary and team, my question is for you. the research grants for masters and PhD students with disability, is a great initiative. As we know, access and inclusion for people with intellectual disability in that kind of role and research is really challenging and has a lot of barriers. I'm just wondering if NDRP has thoughts or plans on, I guess, alternatives in that space. I can see you nodding and smiling, going, of course you asked this question, Rachel.
Look, it's absolutely front and central to thinking about that. One of the things that we're going to be piloting this year is the involvement of people with intellectual disability in actually helping to critique the grants. So if you're doing research about people with intellectual disability, expect a panel of people with intellectual disability to be looking at, is your co-design what we really think it should be? And we're working closely with our partners at Inclusion Australia on that pilot, because in our research panels that we had for the assessment of our first round, we had a lot of people with disability, including someone with intellectual disability who helped assess the grants. And this is sort of the systemic change that we want to do as well. It's the whole cycle of research funding, from the research applications that are led by and with people with disability, the way they're assessed, the way they're implemented. But in terms of, it is a gap in terms of supporting people with intellectual disability, but many of our projects are doing great work. And Rhonda Farrager, I'm not sure if Rhonda's still here, her project is looking at young people with intellectual disability in their research. She's got battled the employment services in her university to get the co-researchers with disability on staff, and this is some of the structural barriers. But really, some of our work is leading by example too, and we want to showcase those projects that are actually really trying to shift that power balance. And some of those big institutional structures, like how we pay people at universities, is another barrier. And that's why a partnership with a community organisation is fantastic, because community organisations don't have to battle that bureaucracy often of a university. Don't know if it really answers your question, but certainly something that we'd love to work with you more about too, Rachel. Sue, any more online questions before we wrap up?
Sue speaking. Sorry, yes, there are. There's a few questions which I would collectively group with an answer. So the questions are around creating teams and creating partnerships, and there's a few on that, and how can we do that? So I hear and I'm reading about eagerness and enthusiasm to get started. So I'm going to give you a list of homework, please. So the Smarty Grants form will open on Monday. The detailed guidelines will be available on Monday. So between now and Monday, please make sure your Smarty Grants account is up and running and ready so that you can open the form. And I would really suggest having a look at the grant guidelines, and there's a summary in Auslan and there's a summary in Easy Read, and understand what we're asking for in the application, and then reach out to us about partnership opportunities that you're looking for, because then I can get people who are on the same page about how they would like to connect, and we can help make connections. So that's your homework for the weekend. The other questions are around the pathways to funding for people who might not be affiliated. So again, if you can have a look at what we're asking for and read the information, we can help you make connections. One of the other questions, we got a great question from Matt Harrison about whether people need to disclose their disability in the application. And we just wanted to reassure people that the information you provide in the application is confidential. And so you can describe your teams without naming them, but obviously when you're relying on their expertise, it is really important to put their information in, but it's confidential. So we're not disclosing the information in your applications to outside. And every time you will have heard Mary read the blurbs for our Disability Research Leadership Program successful candidates. We check information with everybody before we go public about anything. So people have approved those blurbs, for example, and it will be the same with successful teams. So everything that you read and see about our research teams, we have checked in with them as to what we say and how we say it. And that's really important because different people want to disclose their lived experience and their roles in different ways. So please know that we will work with you on that information. Thanks, Mary.
Thank you, Sue. Any final questions in the room before we wrap up? It's been a long morning. Okay. Well, I'm between you and a bite to eat, and those online, you and a run to your kitchen maybe, or a snack. I just wanted to pause and acknowledge what has taken us to get us to this point. Building a national disability research program doesn't happen overnight. The Working Party was started many, many years ago. Now we're an independent organisation. It happens because people persist, because people advocate, and because people refuse to accept about us is good enough. It has to be nothing about us without us. So the Minister's not here, but I'd like to thank the Minister for her leadership and for recognising that disability-led research is not a niche interest, it's a national priority. Thank you to our board and research committee for the integrity, discipline and vision you bring to this work. I want to acknowledge the extraordinary NDRP team who've all brought this event together. Doing a hybrid online and in-person event is not easy. Thank you to Sue Tape, our Deputy CEO and Head of Evidence to Action, Sally Belford, our Communications Lead, who have led the design and delivery of the launch, supported by Tam and Jess, Catherine, Kira. Everyone's worked behind the scenes across logistics, access and production, and activities like this don't happen by accident. Thank you to Scott, and Scott is not here. Thank you to Auntie Glendra, sorry. Thank you for being here. We're on the shoulders of giants, so thank you for your work and advocacy over the years. To our Disability Leadership Program cohort, thank you. Congratulations again. And Kelsey, thank you. We're delighted to partner with you. To our funded teams who spoke, to Jess, and to all the teams who have shared what they're doing, thank you. I want to acknowledge everyone who's joined us online. Thank you. Your participation matters. Again, apologies to our WA crew. I hope you have had some stiff coffees this morning. And thank you to our access partners, our Auslan interpreters, captioners, accessibility advisors and production team. And those wanting next steps, stay tuned, as Sue said. There'll be an email blast going out to all of you on Monday with all the information. And today has been a really important milestone, but more importantly, a marker of structural change. So we're very happy that you've all been here. Thank you very much. And I want to leave you with a few words around what we are all about. This is foundational. The NDRP exists to ensure that when evidence is generated in this country, it reflects the wisdom, the priorities and leadership of people with disability. We are building something that will outlast this funding round, something that will outlast individual projects. We are building a national expectation that disability research is disability-led. And I wanted to end with this. Research shapes systems. Systems shape lives. If we change who leads research, we change what evidence is produced. If we change the evidence, we change the decisions that follow. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone online. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I hope those in the room can join us for a bite to eat and some chats. So thanks, everyone.